Welcome to Clubs Made Meaningful from Susner. This is a show about building clubs that people love, where strategy, culture, and brand come together to create real belonging. Let's dive in. Welcome back. Today, we're talking with Kevin Carroll, who brings a really unique perspective to how clubs create lasting member value through facility design and renovation investments. Kevin's lived the day-to-day reality of club operations as a COO and general manager, and we'll talk about that. And now he's helping clubs from the outside, from a consultative side, think strategically about their most significant capital projects to ensure that what gets designed for them works for how clubs operate and how members experience belonging at their respective clubs. Kevin, welcome to the podcast. We're excited to have you here today.
Thank you, Derek. It's my pleasure. It's good to be with you. Always enjoy our conversations.
Let's start with your journey, just to give people who don't know you, even though everyone should, just some background on kind of who Kevin Carroll is. From where I have the research on the back end, you spent over 35 years as a general manager across clubs in the country, really, when we talk about St. Louis and Atlanta and Jupiter, and we'll get into some of those things. Served as the CMAA National Board, including a year as a president, if I have that correct, which is fantastic. And then the last couple of years, you've really transitioned to serving clubs and the industry at large through the McMahon Group and now Peacock and Lewis. Give us a little bit of background on kind of what prompted that shift from working with clubs in a one-off capacity to now you're saying, I want to help them at large in a consulting way.
Yeah, thank you, Tucker. I appreciate that. And I like to share my background. As I age, every year it goes by, it seems like there are fewer and fewer people who know me or know who I am as the industry leaders get younger and younger. So I'm happy to do that. As a friend of mine once said, when I left the presidency of CMAA, he said, you'll find out how fast you go from who's who to who's he. And that's exactly right. That's been my life for the last 10 years or so. I've been in the club industry all my life, essentially. I've loved every minute of it. When I was going to high school, I started washing dishes. My brother was a chef at the local country club in St. Joseph, Missouri, and kind of got the bug. I went away to college to become a city administrator and chase business and that kind of thing, but came back and went back to work at the country club during the summer and really enjoyed it. I followed my brother into the culinary arts and went to the Culinary Institute of America and got a degree there. And before you know it, I'd moved from working in the kitchen to working front of the house as an assistant manager and then general manager. And have been blessed to work at a lot of great clubs around the country, from the University of Kansas, where I started as a general manager at an alumni club, through to St. Louis, a university club, Kansas City for a short while, back to St. Louis at Belle Reeve Country Club, moved to Florida at the Loxahatchee Club, up to Atlanta at Atlanta Athletic Club, finished my management career down here at a little beach club in Palm Beach, and decided to leave the club industry after more than 35 years, or not leave the industry, but leave the general manager role and kind of take my expertise and operational expertise and bring it to the consulting side. And I thought it was just a good time to do it. It was kind of right about the time COVID had hit and finished up. And quite frankly, the governance models at clubs was getting a little screwy and more governors involved in operations and that kind of thing. It seemed like everybody became an expert during COVID and everybody wanted to be helpful, and everyone was very helpful. So I got to be a point, and I was at the age and desire, and I talked to my wife. I said, it's probably time to step back and do a little something different. And what I found moving into the consulting role was that I actually knew more than I thought I knew. It's funny what those 35 plus years of experience bring, and going into boardrooms and going into committee meetings and those kinds of things and talking about strategic planning and master planning and those kinds of things. The questions that were being asked of me were like, I say it was like throwing underhanded pitch to Babe Ruth. It was like, oh my God, I can't believe you don't know the answer to this, and it made me feel very good. It's like, gosh, I guess I do know a lot about private clubs and the private club industry. So it's been very rewarding. I do want to shout out to CMAA, Club Management Association of America, because when I started in the club industry as a young assistant manager, I had a culinary degree, but little else. And I joined CMAA when I was very young, and kind of went through all the programs that I could and learned everything I could. And that association really meant a lot to me, and it helped me in my career to grow and get an education. I wouldn't be here today without that. And then to give back, I served on that board, as you said, and became president of that organization. So kudos to them for everything they've done, for my career.
Does your wife and your family, do they continue to reap the benefits of your culinary prowess?
From time to time, yes, I do. I get in the kitchen from time to time. I find that my favorite thing to make is a reservation.
Help us understand your role at Peacock at Lewis. We know them. I know of them as an architecture firm. A master at interior design and construction, master planning, engineering. In your role as director of club consulting, what are you doing day to day?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question, because it's a role that a lot of architecture firms do not have. And when Brian Idle, our CEO, approached me about coming to work for Peacock and Lewis, he didn't have any title in mind. He really didn't have a job description in mind. Peacock and Lewis become a very, very busy firm. 95% of the business we do is club related. It's related to city clubs, country clubs, yacht clubs, anything with the name club in it is what we do as far as architecture, interior design, and engineering. And Brian, as the CEO, had gotten very, very busy and doing a lot of things. And he said, well, I want you to come on board with me because I know your background. I know your expertise. I've known you for 20 years or so, and I need you to help me. I'm an architect. I love architecture, and doing it is what he told me. He said, but I need you to help me do everything that's not architecture. And so I came on board to assist him with that. And it's a really value add to the client, because I come on board and bring an operator's perspective along with our architects, our interior design team, and our engineering team. Now we also have an operational expertise that I can work with club committees. I've worked with club committees and boards all my life. I know how to interact with those individuals and work with them. Club general managers and chefs often really enjoy seeing me when I come onto a club and say, "Oh my God, we got somebody who gets it. Somebody understands us." And not to say that Peacock and Lewis architects do not understand food and beverage, because they do, but again, from a trust and reliability standpoint, chefs and general managers really like interacting with me, and I can help elevate their voice in a committee room or in a boardroom as to what their needs and wants are when it comes to renovating or even building new facilities.
Right. And you being that kind of bridge between the two expertise, right? That expertise of maybe architecture, then balancing that with the expertise of operating a private club. It's not as easy as just like walking in. A building isn't just a building at a club, right? And
That's
so
right.
when we look at that, talk a little bit about what you've seen now that you kind of get this industry lens, because you work with multiple clubs and you can see it across things. What do you think the biggest disconnect is between how clubs think about their facilities and maybe what actually drives member satisfaction and belonging? Like, what makes a club special rather than just being a building?
Well, clubs are nothing without people, and that is both the members and the staff, and they're equally important, and they have that symbiotic relationship that make a club what it is. Clubs have characters as members, and clubs also have characters on their staff, which are kind of fun. They've got long-term employees, and that kind of thing. But that's what makes a club. But in today's world, clubs have become much, much more than what they were when I grew up working at St. Joe Country Club. We had golf, tennis, swimming, and dining, and that was a country club. And now clubs have expanded to really fill the role as literally that home away from home more of 11 or 12 months out of the year, whether you're up north or down south. Clubs have expanded their roles. Now you cannot really have a country club without fitness. Fitness has grown tremendously in the last 10, 15 years in private clubs and continues to grow. We see that as one of the leading growth areas in clubs today, is expanding fitness centers into performance and longevity centers. It's not just about being fit. It's about how we extend our life, how we change our lifestyle, and clubs have fit into that. The other thing clubs have done have become much more family oriented. Again, growing up in clubs from an employee standpoint, we would see clubs of being, we say family tolerant or children tolerant. if you would, it'd be okay. Children
Yeah.
could be at the club at the club pool between Memorial Day and Labor Day and take tennis lessons and golf lessons, and that was about. Oh, and then if you want to bring them to Mother's Day brunch or Easter, that's fine. But the rest of it, we don't want to see them. And now people join clubs today. Again, the average age of 42 years old. Most of those individuals have 2 children or more, and they are joining country clubs not only for themselves as the adults, but they're joining equally to give their children an experience. That socialization experience that adults enjoy, children also enjoy that, and they're providing that with everything that's not just golf, tennis, and swimming, but expanding those fitness facilities, expanding children's camps. More and more clubs are hiring youth coordinators to have programs year-round, a place where kids can go and do homework after school and mix that in with fun and social games and that kind of thing. So clubs have really developed into that, and they've developed into 11 and 12-month operations whereby members go to the club much more often. And when they're at the club, they spend more time there than they've ever spent before. So we're finding clubs becoming an indispensable part of people's lives.
When you think of the club culture, just in general, right? That's kind of what you're saying when I think of that is, the club culture has really shifted. And I even see when we think of prospective members, them thinking about a club differently. Do you ever think that it hurts the club industry about how certain people think about how it used to be?
Sometimes we see that difficulty with club members, and it's those club members who did join clubs 30 years ago or 40 years ago or less. And, clubs were designed, a lot of clubs, you go back 100 years ago and up until 20 or 30 years ago, clubs were designed for that older baby boom kind of generation, whereby it was the guy who would play golf, the husband would play golf and would go to the club on Saturday and spend the day, play golf and go to the men's grill and have a few drinks or whatever, maybe meet his wife there for dinner at the evening. And those days are gone, but some of those members who are 65, 75 years and older still see that as their club, and that's the way they continue to use the club today. So getting that mindset to change is a little bit of a challenge, but it's evolving, and they see it in their own club. It's like, there's more children around, there's more families around, there's more people around. The club is being used by members completely different than what it was many, many years ago. Some people long for those old days, but those old days are gone. So we've got to be more, in some cases, even tolerant of what's happening around us. So.
With the goal of providing these social experiences, and from an operations standpoint for the club to provide this to members in a really natural, authentic, and seamless way, how are you able to leverage your deep experience in operations, workflow, productivity, and the day-to-day running of a club to help make sure that all the planning that goes into these major design projects bring a better social experience?
Well, it's definitely tying all those things together. And today's world, and the survey data shows us that members today are joining as much for that socialization experience as they are anything else. Surveys from 20 years ago will show that members are joining clubs for golf, and that's transitioned over the years. Now they're kind of neck and neck, and socialization in some surveys are even outdistancing why people join in conjunction with golf. So socialization is a vital part of it. So social spaces are very, very important. And in today's world, bringing people to the club and keeping at the club is more than just having, like the old days, you had a formal dining room and a grill. Seems like every club had a formal dining room and grill, and that was their name, right? It was a grill or a formal dining room. And now clubs have branded restaurants within the club, and they've expanded the restaurants and food offerings within a club so that members don't get bored with the same offerings. And we bring that to the table and bring that expertise. And oftentimes we'll show members in new clubs that we're going into what those industry trends are. We use some survey data from our friends at GGA who've done extensive surveys throughout the United States on how clubs are spending their money or their capital dollars and how they intend to spend dollars in the future. And right at the top of the list, the top 4 things are golf and food and beverage. Indoor dining is number 1. Golf courses are number 2. Outdoor dining is number 3, and golf practice facilities are number 4 on how clubs are spending money. And then we get into fitness and swimming and pickleball and all those other things. But that's what's happening in the world today. And we bring that to the table when we talk to members. The other thing that's important to find out what members want, and that's through a survey process so that data can help drive decisions. But oftentimes we find ourselves as the architects, master planners, of being the educators as well, because oftentimes members only know what they know. Some members only know their club, or they only know their club and maybe one or two others in their community, but they don't see what's happening in clubs nationwide as a whole. So we bring that to them, both from a data perspective and then also graphically in showing them photographs of completed projects and what's happening around the country, and talk to them about how those experiences have enhanced the member value as well as member experience. And since COVID, members are using the clubs like crazy. They're using clubs like never before. And it's not that there are more members necessarily in clubs. It's just that those members at those clubs have found that their clubs provide such great value and such great socialization. And quite frankly, management teams have done a much better job on their food and beverage and upon their golf upkeep, upon their programs, facilities, and amenities that members want to be at those clubs.
I want to dive into food and beverage, but before I let Derek do that, because that's exactly where he wants to go.
He's an eater. He likes to eat.
Oh,
We all do.
I would love to get your perspective on that. Asking your current membership what they want versus kind of helping them get to a space. I've seen so many clubs who have a facility today, and we walk through it and we talk to them and they go, we built this clubhouse without any kind of understanding of who we were going to be versus who we were at that point. And almost like the facility was made for today, but it's not really made for tomorrow. How do you help clubs do that, where they kind of, their current membership might say they want this, but we need to also balance the fact that things are changing and you will need this or something else in the future that your membership they're just not aware of it today.
Well, and that is through the visualization. That is through showing photographs of what's out there and what other clubs are doing and what's trending. And in the food and beverage side of things, clubs have historically, it seems to me, these are my statistics and nobody else's, and what they say about statistics, 87% of them are made up on the spot. Clubs have usually trended about 5 years behind the general population of things that are going on out there, from food and beverage trends to technology to all kinds of things. But I think since COVID, we've ratcheted it up because clubs have found that we can make decisions faster. During COVID, we found out we had to make decisions faster. We had to make decisions overnight. We had to make policy changes, right? We had to do a lot of things. And today's membership, I believe, sees change happening more quickly. So they're more accepting of change. And again, generally, practically speaking, it's that group under 65 are a little bit more susceptible to change. So changes happen.
All right, let's dig in. Let's dig into the F&B.
Let's do it.
Not every member plays golf. Not everybody plays pickleball, but every member cares about the food. Everybody, it's got to be the heart and soul of a club. So when a club is planning a clubhouse, either renovation or a new build, a new design, new facilities, if they're doing this themselves or they're coming at it, what are some examples of where you've helped kind of put them in the right direction where they otherwise might have been going wrong with their kitchen planning, again, with that social experience in mind?
Gosh, there are so many. And we like to think here at Peacock Lewis that we create those improvements with every client with whom we work. Now, granted, there are some general managers and COOs out there more adept at food and beverage and do a better job at food and beverage than others. But we believe we can bring that expertise and show them. As I mentioned before, a lot of clubs now are switching from formal dining and grill dining to branded restaurants. So they have their elevated dining experience. We may not call it formal, but their elevated dining experience is now named for the course designer or the a historical aspect of the club or something like that, and the menus and designs and branding all focus around that. And the same with their casual dining. And then we've introduced ultra casual dining, which clubs never really had before, other than a full snack bar. So we help them think through those concepts. We work with the team, the chef and the food and beverage manager on what possibilities may be on how we can reinvent what the club is all about. And oftentimes we see when clubs come up with a brand new experience, a brand new dining experience, food and beverage revenues will increase 50, 60, 70%. Because now members are using the club more often because they have more variety within their own facility. We look at kitchen designs, and it's interesting. We have to be careful with. There's a lot of great food service designers out there. Oftentimes, and I speak from my own experience, I remember I was doing a kitchen or a club at some point, and the kitchen designer came to me and said, "Well, show me the menu that you want to produce, and I'll design the kitchen around it." Well, that's a joke at a club, right? I mean, show me the menu. This isn't Del Frisco Steakhouse where you don't change the menu, or it's not Ruth's Chris where you don't change the menu in 50 years. It's a club, and you change the menu all the time. So you have to have equipment, and technology is related to equipment that fits a vast amount of possibilities for food and beverage. And that's where the chef and the food and beverage managers and us, even as architects and consultants, can get involved and challenge those food and beverage designers and say, no, hey, wait, you need to work with us on this. So that's some of the value that we can help bring to that. A lot of times at clubs, and it's just the way they are, oh, gee, we've got a restaurateur or two who are members of the club. Let's put them on the house committee, or let's put them on the building committee because they're going to show us how to build a kitchen. Well, that's all well and good, and they can be very successful people, and we can learn a lot from them, but they can also learn a lot from us. And that's where, again, we could come in and challenge a little bit and say, we're not a restaurant with a single theme. We are a club we have to have the best lasagna. We have to have the best, tacos. We have to have the best fresh fish. We have to have the best steaks. We have to have the best pizza. We have to have the best of everything that's in all these restaurants in our 5-mile radius that all our members go to. And consequently, we have to have the equipment that makes all those things possible.
You have to do all of that without profit being a thing. It's not, like you said, it's not like Ruth's Chris necessarily, where, at least my understanding is that in a large majority of these clubs, food and beverage is a loss leader. It's part of the experience, not necessarily something that makes money for operations.
That's correct. Yeah, most clubs are, we have these debates with different people in the industry and different leaders, and I don't want to get into all the personalities and different ones, but there are surveys that say those with the largest subsidy in food and beverage are the most have the highest member satisfaction. When food and beverage is an amenity, you have a higher member satisfaction. Well, it goes to make sense. If you go to your club and they have a tremendous happy hour where you can, make your dinner out of the happy hour, and it only cost, and the drinks are $5. Yeah, I'm going to be pretty happy, right? But you're paying for it in your dues. Nothing's free in clubs. Members don't realize that. They all want something free. Yeah. And I always joke, it's really not free. It's just prepaid, right? It's all built. It's all built in somewhere. But you do have to provide that. And I think that's one thing as a younger general manager that I wish I would have learned and recognized earlier on, and that was you do need to have a few more loss leaders, or you do need to have a better happy hour. You do need to do some things on the front end to provide that member experience and build that socialization to bring people in. I often say, it's better to trade dollars than to lose dollars.
You're talking a lot about the functional side of food and beverage and how that differs from, a restaurant down the street. And I think that that's a big thing. We've been on those conversations with restaurateurs who come to us and say, well, this is how I do it here. And we have to sit in those conversations with whoever's on the other side listening to them. And I feel bad for them just generally, because it's difficult for someone who doesn't necessarily understand what makes a club special and really unique. Isn't that it just offers food. It's that it offers such a wide variety to make people satisfied across all of these things. But I would go back to that flip side when you said, clubs are really leaning into something that's unique for them, or elevated dining that is unique to their club or their history or things like that, and maybe even branding them in a really unique way. When you see that shift from what I would call the classic grill room approach of the past to now we're going to build something that you can only get here. How has that differentiated clubs, like say a club versus a club across the street? If we have different experiences, if we all don't just have standard grill rooms, does that make a bigger impact on our membership?
We sure hope it does. And each membership is going to be a little bit different, a little bit unique. And we've seen clubs and they're out there and they've tried we're going to build an Italian restaurant. We're going to have the best, Italian pastas and we're going to make our own pastas. Well, that's great. And if you need to flip the theme 3 or 4 or 5 years down the line, you can do that.
Right.
And you need to have the flexibility to do that. And that's another area where we look at Peacock and Lewis is when we come in and help design clubs, whether it's kitchens and restaurants or fitness centers or whatever it may be, we've got to keep in mind what the future holds and how easily we can make transformations in the future so that we don't just, start from scratch.
One of the things that Tucker and I talk about is return on experience versus straight up return on investment. And, you already mentioned earlier some of the demographic differences between what the generation of members who joined 30 years ago are looking for and value compared to the ones that are joining today. So when you're working with clubs or navigating a board or a committee on what investments will help shape their facilities, how do you help balance the needs and wants of the 42-year-olds versus the 72-year-olds?
Well, that's an important process as we go through. And as I mentioned earlier, surveys are an important part of it, but hand in hand with the survey are focus groups. And we like to, again, work with GGA, our partners in developing focus groups to hear from members what they like. And when we get in a room with a focus group of about 20 or 25 people, we like to have a wide variety of members in that room. We don't isolate it by, just the 35-year-olds or just the 60-year-olds. We like the 65-year-old to hear what the 35-year-old has to say. And likewise, we like to hear the 35-year-old to hear what the 60. We like those people to interact with each other so that they can hopefully identify with each other on how they use the club and how they'd like to see the club utilized in the future. They're not always going to agree, no question about it, but at least they can hear differing viewpoints. That helps forms the framework for questions that we ask in surveys so that when those surveys go out and the results come back, we can break those down by demographic groups, find out what their wants and needs are, what they like most about the club that they have now and what they'd like to see in the future. GGA breaks it down by, the newer members versus those who've been here a long time. So we can see it. Oftentimes it's that newer, oftentimes younger member is setting the trend for what the future is like. Now, there's not exactly revolution in clubs. I like to say there's more of an evolution. But that's why master planning is so important as you look out for 5 years or 7 years or whatever it may be. The senior or more experienced member can see where the club is trending. Okay, I see what we're doing. We're focusing on swimming and kids' activities and all those kinds of things here, but we are putting some money in the golf course and we're doing some of those things. But over the next 5 to 7 years, our master plan has us going in this direction. They can see that, but it's not happening overnight. All right. So they're not totally turned off by it. And then the newer or younger member who wants to see those changes say, well, I joined this club for X, and now they're making improvements and changes and that kind of thing. And I can see over the next 5 to 7 years that I'm going to be getting more of my wants and needs met over a period of time.
How often, or maybe let me reframe that. How important is it for members to understand the where we're going as a club type of a conversation rather than just seeing the 5-year plan? How important is it that 5-year plan is led in with here is who we are or here is who we are going to be over the next couple of years? Do you think that's super important for people to understand?
I think it's very important for people to understand. It's important for prospective new members to understand what differentiates you from, again, whether it's a club down the street or a club across town, what differentiates you from those individuals? And it's not just the club you're joining today, but what is that club for the future? So whether that's a new member who say, okay, the initiation fee is whether it's $25,000 or $125,000, and here's what your dues are and here what your capital fees are, but you want to look at it and say, well, and then we've laid this out and we have not only a master plan, we've got a financial plan to go with this. And here's what we anticipate those being over the next 5 years. I think it gives great comfort to a new member coming in so that they've got an idea. Now, everybody knows it can fluctuate, a little bit here or there, but I believe it also gives the current member an opportunity to look towards the future and say, yes, this club continues to meet my needs, and our family can continue to afford it, and we want to be here. Now, there are those on the, whether it's there's always the bottom 10 or 15% or whatever of club who are struggling to hang on, and they may not be able to afford it, but it lays out that future for them where they can say, as a family, we can afford the club today. We can afford the club next year. We can maybe afford the club 2 years, but maybe 5 years down the road, we're going to have to change our lifestyle and either cut back on vacations or cut back on something so that we can enjoy the club more, or we need to cut the club out of our lifestyle. But wouldn't you like to have that, make those decisions yourself over a long period of time rather than just having something sprung on you like, okay, the board's come forward and there's a $50,000 assessment to redo the club?
You've had such great experience across the GMs and architects and designers, and you've worked with all of these great people and have such great perspectives. So in your opinion, what separates a club project from just being a good investment to being really transformational and saying, hey, this is going to be something that really sets the stage for who we are going to be moving forward? What do you think really drives that?
Well, it's something that whenever we do projects and look at master plans, we have to include as much as we can for everyone. We have to look at socialization spaces, the food and beverage and dining aspects. We have to include golf and that kind of thing. We need to include pool and tennis, pickleball being strong right now. Padel is up and coming. And Padel is kind of an interesting thing that's fastest growing sport around the rest of the world, but not necessarily here, but it is growing. And we're introducing that to members right now as well and saying, this may not be something for you now, but it's something to look at in the future. Again, future trends. So we lay those out there so that people know what's going on. But from a transformative aspect, again, oftentimes it's that food and beverage of completely changing things around as to what your club is, indoor, outdoor dining, how we form that together. During COVID, we all found out, what, we like outdoors more than we thought we did. We didn't realize we liked being outdoors so much, but gosh, we really enjoy being outdoors. So we find that indoor outdoor has really been as much transformative as anything else. Socialization spaces, in making sure that there's great socialization spaces in the rackets area, in the golf simulator area, wherever it may be, so you can turn on and turn off food and beverage outlets when you have different functions in different areas of the club, even to the extent of having food trucks on the driving range during peak times and those kinds of things. So transformation is not just facilities, but it's also programming. I was at a club a few years ago, and the club had put in a fair number of simulators. And I was talking to people in the focus groups about the simulators and how they utilize them. And it was to a person in a focus group like, well, we really don't use those very much. Simulators aren't getting very much use. My next follow-up question would be like, well, what kind of programming do you have for those simulators? What has your golf shop staff done to educate you and bring you in and give complimentary training and all that kind of stuff? And everybody looked at each other. It's like, oh, we've never had any of that. That's never taken place. So it's all about, talk about transformative. Programming has to be a transformative aspect of what happens at the club as well to match the facilities and amenities that are there.
Right. Just having a building isn't going to be enough.
That's not going to do it.
It's going to be, if you don't show people how to use it or give them an opportunity to really use that space properly, it's just not going to be anything more than, the fitness club down the street. Oh, I could join Lifetime Fitness and that would be just fine.
I'm fortunate enough to belong to a club down here in Jupiter, and we had 2 bocce ball courts, and they're right next to the clubhouse. Prime real estate, right next to the clubhouse. And first 3 years we were members, 4 years, nobody was ever using the bocce courts, hardly ever get used. And then finally, I think a member said, well, let's try and get some bocce teams going and kind of put together a little something. Well, then the club hired a new food and beverage manager, and this young dynamic guy comes on board. He's like, I think that bocce's really got some possibilities. What do you think? And I was talking to him about it. I said, I've seen it in the club industry and other clubs I've been to and other clubs I've visited. A great bocce league, getting people involved. It's going to drive beverage. It's going to drive food sales. It's going to drive these things on certain nights when you have those things. They took the bocce in-house, and oh my God, now we've got, 150 people playing bocce on the nights that we're open for bocce tournaments, from 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock, the restaurant's jammed. They put a bar cart out at the beverage area and they're selling drinks. And I mean, it's transformed because somebody took responsibility and somebody said, we can make this happen. So again, it goes back to the program. The facilities were there and nobody did anything with them. It was all about the program.
Last question. You've had this incredible vantage point over your awesome career, managing, seeing clubs from the inside, seeing how they've evolved over these decades. What makes you the most optimistic? I mean, the last 5 years have been a huge boom with COVID. Clubs seem to be very healthy. It seems to be, like you said, if they were 5 years behind, now they're catching up. Are you optimistic about the future of private clubs?
Yeah, I'm terribly optimistic about private clubs, and I'm glad you asked that. In the late 90s, again, old enough to be around during the late 90s when we were building golf courses left and right, and all of a sudden we were overbuilt and we had a recession and things happened, and there was a little bit of a leveling of the playing field. And now there's more golf courses being built again. There's a lot more vanity golf courses being built. That's these ultra wealthy individuals going out building their own private clubs, their own playground. But that's kind of off the table. That's separate. What I'm optimistic about in the private club industry right now is these individuals growing up in clubs. We're becoming much more family oriented. So the 10 and 12 and 14 and 16-year-old who now are growing up in clubs and are seeing a club in a whole new way are making the club a lifestyle experience that when they matriculate through college and they go on, that they're going to want that experience for themselves and their families like never before. And that's going to help perpetuate clubs into the future. We talked about the baby boom generation, and we had a little decline in the birth rates, and now birth rates, the average age of people joining clubs 42. So we've got every year right now, we've got more 42-year-olds aging into the marketplace. So we got more customers for clubs for like the next 5-7 years. We're building that next client base. We're building that next club member by doing such a great job, by being so family-centric and making clubs indispensable in members' lives. That's what it's all about. You've got to be indispensable.
Thanks, Kevin. This is a great conversation. I think if I would be allowed to, Derek won't let me, but I'd talk all day. I think this is a fantastic kind of learning moment for those who have just seen that evolution across the years, but also really that future sentiment makes me really excited. But the biggest thing that I'm taking away from this is that the facilities that you make, even if they're the most beautiful facilities in the world, that is just that raises the floor for your club's potential. But how you raise the ceiling and how you really reach the full potential of a club is by how you use that space. And like, what is the programming and how do you make a space more social? And how do you make it so it feels like our club, not just any club? And I think that your experience, but also just your candor today was really great. I thank you for that.
Well, maybe next time you'll get me to open up just a little bit more.
We'll talk more about Kansas next time.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
All right.
If today's conversation resonated with any of you listening, please share this episode with another club leader who's thinking about design projects or renovations, and please go look up Kevin and Peacock and Lewis. Thanks for listening today. Cheers. Thanks for listening to Clubs Made Meaningful. At Susner, we help private clubs build brands that create belonging. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone in your club world. And until next time, let's create something worth celebrating.